After the previous installment, Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, which reintroduced the Jason Voorhees character, Part 7 was originally intended to be a crossover film between Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger. With each Friday the 13th sequel, the box office profits were diminishing, with the films in the Nightmare on Elm Street series grossing nearly twice the amount of the Friday the 13th films. Paramount Pictures proposed the crossover idea to New Line Cinema, the rival company who held the rights to the Elm Street films, with Paramount controlling domestic distribution and New Line controlling international distribution. The idea was abandoned after the two companies failed to come to an agreement. So eventually, this film became a Jason vs. Carrie film in John Carl Buechler's 1988 film Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, Jim.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. Connor here with you, along with Chris, and today we are doing Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. And Chris, I always go first on our kind of opening little thoughts here. I thought I'd let you go first on this one and let me know what you think about the film.
Sure thing. I mean, you might regret that. As a kid, this was always one that I liked a lot. As an adult, it is one of them that has aged not as well. So it's fun and interesting, but it's a little it's when the series starts to get a little over the top, a little too goofy. It was originally going to be when they first tried to get Freddy versus Jason made, and then there was kind of that didn't happen because Freddy was with New Line Cinema and Jason was with Paramount, and they couldn't come to terms on who was going to distribute and make which money and have more creative control, and executives doing executives things. So, but that doesn't really have anything to do with this film. They ended up settling on this sort of Jason versus Carrie type of concept, and it's fun and it's interesting. Once you get 6, 7 entries into a franchise that's just going in a straight linear path, there's only so many different things you can do that are new and fresh and unique without just being the same formula, while still keeping it true to the tradition. And so it's a solid attempt. If it wasn't so butchered by the MPAA, maybe it would have been rounded out a little better. But it's one that where I would have rated it as a 12-year-old versus where I rate it now are very different. I'll say that.
Yeah, I like this film a lot as a kid. I mean, they used to have like the Friday the 13th marathons, and sometimes they still have them nowadays, but I would stay up on I'd see them on like Spike TV and whatnot on Friday the 13th, and I'd stay up till 11, 12 o'clock waiting for this one to come on in marathon and then have to go to school the next day or something. So I liked this one a lot as a kid. I liked Jason's design or his costume in this, I guess you could partake in.
Yeah, as a kid, I think you're always into, well, at least me and my buddy were always into the idea, like, whenever it was time in the movie for the characters to fight back against Jason, and the idea of someone being able to put up a fight against him. So having a literal psychic battle him and do all these different, traps and attacks and things like that, that was always really cool to see as a kid. We were into that. As an adult, when you're a kid and there's 8 of these movies and it's just like, or 10, 11, 12, however many, and it's like, oh, this is the one with the psychic. You kind of just take it for what it is because it's there from the beginning as far as you're concerned. But when you go back and you watch them all, and then it's like, okay, now Jason's a zombie. Okay, now he's fighting a psychic. It's like, yeah, we're far ways away from the, mongoloid with a hood on who is just killing people.
Yeah, I always enjoyed this one. It's got a couple little good scenes in it. It's got still a couple good kills, even though, like you said, it was butchered in post production and whatnot. But I still find enjoyment. This is one of the ones I still put on that out of the franchise. This is probably one of the most. This is the one of the ones that get the most rewatch time from me, I guess you could say.
Interesting.
Why don't I go ahead and get into some background and information on the film for us, and we'll continue our way through. Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, is a 1988 American supernatural slasher film directed by John Carl Buechler and starring Lar Park Lincoln, Kevin Blair, Susan Blue, Terry Kaiser, and Kane Hodder in his first appearance as Jason Voorhees, a role he would reprise in 3 subsequent films. It is a sequel to Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, and the 7th installment in the Friday the 13th franchise. Set years after the events of the previous film, the plot follows a psychokinetic teenage girl who unwittingly releases Jason from his tomb at the bottom of Crystal Lake, allowing him to go on another killing spree in the area. The New Blood was intended to have a higher standard of quality than that of the previous installments, with high-profile directors being considered to helm the project. Paramount Pictures sought a partnership with New Line Cinema to create a crossover film between Friday the 13th and a Nightmare on Elm Street series, which would not come to fruition until New Line bought the rights to the franchise, releasing Freddy vs. Jason in 2003. After several failed concepts, screenwriter Daryl Haney suggested an idea akin to Jason vs. Carrie, in which Jason would battle a teenage girl with psychokinetic abilities. The film was released on May 13, 1988, to mostly negative reviews from critics. So there is a little background on the film.
Yeah, it's kind of not surprising. I mean, were the critics ever going to embrace this one? Were the critics ever going to embrace any of these movies? I don't think so.
No, and we'll continue on and get into more of the fun stuff here in a little bit, but why don't we go ahead and get into a trailer on the film? I'll give off and read a plot synopsis on the film, and then we'll get into the numbers, the fun facts, and all our favorites from Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood.
This is the one you've been waiting for.
What's happening to me?
Your psychokineses and these delusions.
No, you're not listening to me!
The one you've been asking for.
Hey, Tina, isn't this the way they wear their jackets back in the mental hospital?
Concentrate. Concentrate, Tina!
The one you've been dying for.
You people give me the creeps. Okay, you big hunk of a man, come and get me!
Jason is back. But this time, someone is waiting.
Jason?
Tina, don't go in there!
Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood.
There goes the neighborhood.
After witnessing her alcoholic father physically abusing her mother, a young Tina Shepard attempts to escape the chaos at home and heads out onto Crystal Lake in a boat. When her father follows her in an attempt to stop her, Tina's dormant telekinetic abilities emerge, and she accidentally destroys the dock her father is standing on, causing him to fall into the lake and drown. Years later, a teenage Tina is still struggling with remorse surrounding her father's death. Her mother, Amanda, takes her to the same lakeside residence as part of her treatment from her psychiatrist, Dr. Cruz. He begins a series of experiments, including verbal assaults designed to agitate Tina's mental state, forcing her powers to become more pronounced. In reality, he is only trying to exploit her psychic powers. After a particularly upsetting session with Dr. Cruz, Tina runs from the cabin onto the dock thinking about her father's death. While thinking about him, she wishes he would come back. Her powers unwittingly awaken mass murderer Jason Voorhees, who was chained at the bottom of Crystal Lake at the end of Part 6, and he emerges from the water to commit another killing spree. Next door to the Shepherd residence is a group of teens who are throwing a birthday party for their friend Michael. The group includes Michael's cousin, Nick, Preppy Russell and his girlfriend Sandra, Ben and his girlfriend Kate, science fiction writer Eddie, stoner David, perky Robin, shy Maddie, and snobby socialite Melissa. Nick, who has arrived just for the party, becomes attracted to Tina, much to Melissa's chagrin. Melissa attempts to break up Tina and Nick, even going as far as kissing Eddie to make Nick jealous. But her schemes are to no avail, other than making Eddie feel spurned thereafter. Tina tells Nick about Jason and has a vision of him murdering Michael. Meanwhile, Jason kills Michael and his girlfriend Jane, later murdering another couple camping in the woods as well. When Tina goes off with Nick to find her mother, Jason proceeds to kill the other teens one by one. Russell and Sandra go to the lake for a swim. While Sandra goes skinny dipping, Russell is killed with an axe to his face. Sandra discovers his body just before she is pulled under the water and drowned. Maddie goes looking for David but finds Russell's body. She runs for help, but Jason attacks her in a nearby barn and kills her with a sickle. Jason then kills Ben by crushing his skull and then Kate by driving a party horn into her eye. Inside the house, Jason stabs David and slices Eddie's neck open. Upstairs, Robin finds David's severed head and is thrown out through a window to her death. When Jason attacks Dr. Cruz, he saves himself by using Amanda as a human shield, but Jason eventually kills him with the pole chainsaw. Tina finds her mother's body shortly afterward and uses her powers to electrocute Jason and crush part of the house down onto him. When Nick and Tina try to tell Melissa what happened, she thinks that they are crazy and tries to leave, but Jason kills her with an axe to the face. Nick tries to fight off Jason, but he is quickly subdued. Tina unleashes her powers, breaking Jason's mask and exposing his disfigured and decomposed face. As the battle rages on, the Shepherd Lakeside cabin is destroyed by an explosive fire and the attack continues on the dock. Although Tina is unable to kill Jason, she unknowingly summons the spirit of her father, who rises from the lake and drags Jason back down with him into the depths of Crystal Lake, chaining the serial killer once more. The following morning, Tina and Nick are taken away in an ambulance. A firefighter finds Jason's broken mask in the wreckage, and the screen fades to black as Jason whispers can be heard in the distance. Alright, Chris, how about we run into some numbers here for you?
Sounds good.
So we'll get you on the inflation calculator. Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, had a budget of $2.8 million and a gross return of $19.2 million at the box office.
Yep, in 2024 dollars, that would be roughly equivalent to about $7.4 million for a budget and $50.9 million for a box office return, which, again, doing the simple math there, 7 times 7 is 49, so you're talking about, more than 7 times the budget at the box office before rentals and video sales and TV deals and all of the ancillary stuff. So still a successful little project for Paramount.
And it was just under Part 6 return. Part 6 had a $3 million budget, so just a little bit higher than this one, and it grossed $300,000 more dollars at the box office. So they were, number 6 and 7 were very close to the success that they had.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, it's funny that this was considered sort of the lower end, because nowadays, those micro budget horror movies that cost $1 to $5 million or $1 to $10 million, and if they pull in $50 million, like, that's not considered a bad thing at all, So again, it's kind of funny how it's all relative.
Yep, I mean, this was still a box office success. I mean, all these films are technically considered box office successes, and most of them, they multiplied their budget or made their budget, times 4 what their budget was. If their budget was $4 million, they usually made about 14, 15, 16 million. So, I mean, none of them are really true failures at the box office.
No, and you have to consider now that it's like Star Trek or Star Wars, not to that scale, but in the sense that they've been resold on TV, on streaming, on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, 4K. You know, they keep getting repackaged for the next iteration. It's like everything that Paramount makes off of these movies has been pure green for decades now.
Well, and then they released that Shout Factory or Scream Factory, you know, the bundle of them for $100 and some, and I'm sure fans all over bought it. I was one of them who purchased it, you know. So I mean, they just keep selling them 4Ks and Blu-rays.
Yeah. Every time they license to one of those third parties, they're getting a check. You know, places like Shout Factory, Arrow Video is doing a 4K disc of the 2009 reboot. You know, so it's like that's another licensing fee they're getting. You know, so yeah, highly profitable franchise.
Absolutely, it all adds up. This film had a rating of 5.2 out of 10 on IMDb, a 33% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a 13% rating on Metacritic, so they didn't like this film at all. But our Google users gave it an 83% of Google users liked this film. Jason's on screen for 9 minutes and 8 seconds, or roughly about 10% of the film. And there are a total of 16 deaths in the film, which averages out to about 1 every 5.5 minutes. So still a little bit on the quicker side for that. And we get a good amount of Jason as well.
Yep, that sounds about right, you know.
What we do get of Jason in this film, I absolutely think is phenomenal. I think Kane Hodder portrays him very well in this. This might be my favorite look out of the four that Kane Hodder portrays.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little. I think it's great. That Kane Hodder's in it. I think he's one of the unsung, highlights of this movie. Well, not unsung. I mean, everyone knows that Kane Hodder's great in here, but I think he's one of the highlights, one of the best things. There's a lot about this movie that you could kind of complain about or not be impressed with or whatever, but Kane Hodder kind of makes the whole thing kind of come together really well. He really brings a good characterization to Jason, and it is a good, like, the really decayed look. It's a cool, unique look. You definitely remember that look. You can argue that it's a little too decayed, a little too just like straight up a corpse or straight up a zombie, but generally I do enjoy it, and I think, once he's unmasked at the end, he like conveys like a lot of rage through a heavy set of prosthetics. Like, you just feel like Jason is pissed this whole movie, and that comes through the performance, and I really like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love some of the things that Kane Hodder does, like the heavy breathing he does, or the turning his head before he actually like moves his body in the direction that he's going or heading. And there's just little like subtleties that he does that you don't see in previous like portrayals of Jason.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a bittersweet thing. It would have been cool to see. They say that if the director hadn't lobbied for Kane Hodder so hard, C.J. Graham probably would have been back. And it's like, man, that's one of those 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other kind of scenarios, because I would have been just as happy for C.J. Graham to get another shot.
Yeah, he was phenomenal in the last film, but I am glad that we get Kane Hodder. I've always been a fan of his, even in other movies. He's done so many movies. He's done action movies, but mostly he's in horror movies. He portrays Victor Crowley in the Hatchet films, if you've ever seen those or heard of those.
Yes. Yeah, they're fun.
I think those are fun little cheese, and I like him in those as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a shame that sort of the most codified kind of official Jason portrayal is kind of in some of the lesser or more wild and wacky entries of the series.
Yeah, why don't I get into some fun facts for you? I really like this first one because I had no idea this first one, which is Walt Gorney, who played Crazy Ralph in Friday the 13th and Friday the 13th Part 2, is the opening narrator at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, I thought that was a really great piece of trivia as well. It's like there's not a logic behind it. There are people that sort of hypothesize that he's sort of like speaking from the beyond the grave, but it is a fun, cool kind of nod and connection, to kind of get a previous victim and the previous sort of crazy old man to be the narrating voice of a later entry. It's a fun callback.
Yeah, and I think his voice, he does a very good job, and he has a perfect voice for the voiceover that they needed with all the flashback scenes and whatnot. It flows over it very well with like the little music and whatnot in the background, like very faintly.
Yeah, and as much as the sort of recap and montage isn't really a necessary thing in the age where all of these movies are easily accessible, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the movies that open with a bit of a recap or a little bit of a retread through the series up to that point, or highlights of the events. Just as a reminder, and it kind of just makes it all feel a little bit more tied together when they're actually pulling the footage and showing the material that's happened so far.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I love it. I wish more films would do it nowadays with, like, if you're going to have a sequel, and they just don't. A lot of films got away from that, or even some horror movies will still do it today, but it's very rare from the films, at least that I see.
Yeah, and I think it's a little fun, and I think that if you could do it in an interesting way, the second Spider-Man movie from Sam Raimi sort of did the opening credits, like recontextualizing certain imagery from the first movie as like comic book art. So you were kind of getting a recap without like just using the footage. It was showing the imagery and the key moments through like comic art during the credits, and I thought that was a genius move. So I think there's ways to do it in unique ways that aren't the typical way of doing it, and but still get the same effect of recapping a little bit.
Absolutely. I'll continue here with some more of the fun facts. The archive footage section of the credits refers to Darren from Part 6 as David, which is the name of one of the characters in this film. Also, it does not refer to Officer Thornton by name, but as Cop on the Pier.
Such a shame.
He was in very little of the film, and he had a good kill, but he's just a cop on the pier.
You don't even get a name.
At the end of the film, Tina Shepard is taken into an ambulance and asks where Nick is, only to find out that he is lying next to her. It is like the ending of Friday the 13th Part 2 when Jenny Field is taken away in the ambulance and asks where Paul Holt is, except that this time, Nick is alive and well in the ambulance. So I like that little call back as well. That was a nice touch.
It always feels like it's a direct sort of wink and a nod or flip of the bird, perhaps, to the way that number 2 ended, where she's doing where's Nick, and then you immediately get he's all right, and then he's right there.
Yeah, and I mean I like that they both survived. I'd still like to, even though we already theorized about it, I would still like to know what happened to Paul.
Yeah.
The beloved hockey mask that Jason stole from Shelley in Part 3 gets destroyed by Tina's psychokinetic power during his climactic struggle with her near the end of the movie. In the next installment of the series, he obtains a completely new mask from one of his new victims, but it still has the axe hash in the side of his head.
Yeah, that's one of those things that's always been a little annoying. And I'm also quite sure that in Part 6, he was shot in the head through the mask, and there was a new bullet hole added to the mask that does not carry over for Part 7. So,
yeah, kind of like you always said, continuity is hard.
Yeah, and especially with this sort of franchise, they were not caring. We're lucky we get as much as we do.
In some films, you see some people want to do like all the bullet holes and all the cuts and stuff like that, and sometimes it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
The Jarvis house appears in some exterior shots, and some interior shots, such as Robin's death, happens in Tommy's room from Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
Yeah, I believe that's the one where she was slashed in the abdomen, and then they said it didn't look good, so then they redid the scene where she's thrown out the window. And some people have pointed out that, being thrown out the window and just landing on the ground from that height would not necessarily be an automatic total death, like it certainly would be hurt. You certainly would be injured, but like falling from the second story of a house like onto the ground is not like it's not necessarily a fatal situation.
No, and one of the bonus features for this film is that her stunt double, like it
was a stunt
man.
man.
Yeah.
It was a stunt man. Yeah. So now I can't unsee that when she's thrown out the window. I can't unsee that it's kind of like a dude in a wig.
I wasn't sure if you knew that one, so I thought I'd throw that one out there.
Yeah. I heard that one somewhere through the years.
My last one for you here is Kane Hodder performed the fire stunt for 40 seconds and suffered burns on his neck and chest, and he kept in character and finished the scene waiting to receive medical attention until after filming had ended.
Whew. Yeah. He's an excellent stuntman, and I mean, he had injured himself with some kind of burn, or he had been a burn victim of some variety earlier in his life. So, doing this crazy burn stunt is even more impressive.
Yeah, there's a documentary about him, and I can't remember exactly what it was called, but he was trying to do a stunt for TV that went wrong, and he ended up getting third-degree burns all over his chest and whatnot. So to experience that and then still continue to go be a stuntman and do fire stunts and everything like that is just I don't know if I could do that. I mean, the guy's, I mean, he's a true champ for that. I mean, he took it.
He's a legend. He's a legend. He deserved to be. If only they could have discovered him and cast him as Jason like 4 movies sooner. He deserves to have a whole legacy as the character.
Yeah, I mean, films don't do that anymore. You very rarely see characters. I mean, besides like Robert Englund with Freddy, because he talks and you can hear the voice, or like Warwick Davis with Leprechaun, like silent killers, you don't see repeat actors perform as them very often.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I have for you on the fun facts side. Why don't we go ahead and I will get into, Chris, who was your favorite character in this film?
So, I mean, because of the performance, a part of me would actually want to kind of break the rules and say Jason in this one. But I would say, I guess by default, I'd have to go with Tina. Anyone who's got psychic abilities and can fight Jason with their mind. That's a pretty cool setup. So I'd say favorite character. I would love to say Jason because he's such a great villain and it's Kane Hodder's performance, but it would be Tina. These movies usually just have survivors. They don't really have heroes, but because she has these cool psychic abilities, she actually gets to be a sort of literal hero and have like do battle with Jason and not just kind of run away and try to wound him. So it's a unique spin, and as wacky as it is and as over the top and goofy as it all kind of is, it's still cool, and it makes this entry memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to agree with you on that one. She's kind of got like a tragic backstory. Like, she was kind of witnessed from outside that her dad was kind of abusing her mom when he got drunk and was hanging out with his friends. And then she accidentally kills her dad. And now they're going back to the place where she accidentally killed her dad. And now she thinks she feels a presence of her dad, and it ends up being Jason, and she releases him and starts a whole killing spree. And she is just dealt a bad hand in this movie.
Yeah, and another, a double entry in the case of the hero being the reason that Jason is out and killing people. Tommy Jarvis did it in the last movie, and she does it in this movie.
Yeah, they're nobody's catching any breaks in these films.
Yeah, you get it's not some bad guy accidentally awakening Jason. The freaking heroes of the movies are doing it, so then they are morally obligated to be the ones to stop Jason in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. But she does come through, and I mean, she has a nice little turnaround, and she takes care of things and handles her own.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, how about we get into our favorite score? What do you got for that?
Yeah, so Harry Manfredini, who had composed all the films to this point, didn't actually return for this one. They had a new composer doing new themes. They reused a number of Harry Manfredini's themes, so he has credit on the film, but he didn't actually do any new compositions for this. They were done by oh my goodness, let me find the composer's name. They were done by Fred Mullen, and I don't know who specifically did the track I'm about to mention, but it's a really solid one. It's listed as prologue / MT / hockey mask, and it's sort of used in the beginning, but it gets to this point somewhere around the 2-minute and 20-second mark, if we want to play that for the audience when the time comes, where it goes into like these interesting drums, and it's silent, and it just sets this kind of epic tone that the movie doesn't really live up to, but it is really a good piece of music, though, so I wanted to mention it.
Absolutely. I will my favorite score was the official title of it was called the Prologue.
Yeah,
and,
I don't know what this. Yeah, I don't know what the /MT was, but on YouTube it had the /MT in there. I'm like, movie trailer? Did they use it for the movie trailer? I don't know.
Yeah, I was kind of ignoring that for the time being because I wasn't sure, but yeah, that was my favorite one as well. I also they brought back a theme from Friday the 13th Part 6, and I'll have to splice a little bit of that in here as well because I liked that from the kitchen kill when he's hiding in the corner and he ends up killing the guy in the kitchen with the butcher knife because I liked that as well.
That entire kill is excellent. I love that it's in the darkened room, and then the lightning flashes and you see him revealed in the corner. It's like this movie might be a little bit on the lower tier overall, but that is that scene is cinema as far as that reveal of Jason.
Yeah, because it's very subtle, and if you're paying attention to the character and not looking around the room, you do not see Jason whatsoever. But as a horror fan, you know as soon as that lightning flashes, you're going to take a peek in the corners and you see him standing there.
Yeah, and they do not call a lot of attention to it with like an insert shot or a special effect or a sound effect or anything like that. It's really good.
It truly is. But our favorite score, the Prologue MT Hockey Mask, I will play a little bit of that for everyone here. All right, Chris, you went first on those two. I'll go first for my favorite quote or line of dialogue from the scene. And it was from Tina. It was just a simple one where she kind of finds she's in Dr. Cruz's office and she's looking through everything and she finds all the clippings of Camp Crystal Lake and Jason, and she just kind of like starts to tremble and goes, Jason Voorhees. And then like, it was him in the lake. And she just like has a complete panic attack and the room just starts like shaking and pictures are falling off the wall and she's kind of just losing it as she realized she just let a complete psycho out of the river or the lake. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good line. I'm pretty sure one of the pieces of trivia that I read was that it takes the longest in this movie for Jason's name to finally be said, and I think it's somewhere in like the 50-minute mark, something like that. So that's great that's the line. I actually like the opening narration line, not the full narration obviously, but just, there's a legend around here, a killer buried but not dead, a curse on Crystal Lake, a death curse, Jason Voorhees' curse. I'm like, that sets the tone, That's just really epic, So that's my favorite line.
Damn, my man Chris is spitting over there. No. that is phenomenal. That is a way to start a movie. And if there was anything, which I'm sure there is somewhere, like if we had it around here, like G Fest or something like that, where it was a Friday the 13th marathon, like I'm sure that line comes up, fans would go nuts in theaters.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That is a definite good one. Good choice. I'm almost mad I didn't pick it myself, but good choice for sure. I'll go first on favorite scene for you as well, and I'll leave kill for you to go first.
Okay.
So my favorite scene was probably the Jason versus Tina showdown. Once Jason kind of kills Melissa and just tosses her aside, from there on out, it's like balls to the wall. She hits him with the lamp that's hanging, and Kane Hodder as Jason falls down the steps, breaks out the side of the steps and grabs Nick and throws him against the wall. And this is where the famous she snaps his mask off, and we get the triumphant reveal of what Jason looks like, and we get the fire stunt, and that it's probably about a 10 to 12 minutes there that is just phenomenal action between Tina and Jason, and it's what you came to see. And I think the director, John Carl Buechler, I think he delivered right there towards the end. I think the ending of this film is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's my favorite scene too, specifically from the point where Jason's unmasked to the end. I love that she's sort of closing it around and tightening it around his head, and then it just snaps perfectly in two. Then you see his face. I love, we'll get into it later, but Jason's sort of very decayed look in this movie, and the fact that he spends so much without his mask, people can argue that that's sort of off-brand, that, you watch the last 10 minutes of the movie, you wouldn't even be able to tell maybe that it was a Friday the 13th movie. But I think it's still on its own. It's very cool looking, and it's very unique, and with all the exposed skeleton, like his spine in the back, and the bones in his fingers, and like his orbital bone around his eye. I like that they have the piece cut out of the side from the damage from the propeller in part 6, and his sort of cheekbone with his teeth hanging out the side. Like, it's just a really good sort of decaying creature kind of design, and I love it. And the fact that we get to see Jason without his mask for such an extended period of time in this movie is unique to this film, and I've always liked that.
Absolutely. I mean, what more could you ask for? I think it's great because he just we'll get into it after I get into like favorite kill and whatnot. We went into a little bit, but there's a lot more to talk about with that. So I'll ask you who your favorite death was, or death scene in the film.
Yeah, I'll cheat a little bit. I'll say the sleeping bag death is my favorite sleeping bag death, but also I like the golf club swing axe to the face as well. That's another good one. That sort of vertical split of the face. And yeah, so the sleeping bag death, I actually think that the edited one and the theatrical version, that's just one brutal swing, I actually like that one was edited. The axe to the face is unfortunate because the uncut version of the death is so much more grotesque, and you see the blood blasting out of his face after he gets hit with it. But those two are always ones that come to mind for me with this movie.
I absolutely do like the sleeping bag one as well. I know Friday the 13th fans, I mean, if you're a big fan of this, you know this, but I mean, clearly there's deleted scenes where he's hitting the sleeping bag against the tree like 4 or 5 times, but that one hit just does it. It's so much more effective that he just picks her up. It's one smash and she's dead. It just,
yeah,
like brute strength of Jason.
Yeah, and to make an argument there, when you see the extended scene and how many times he's bashing it and how blood-soaked it becomes, you get this sense that when that sleeping bag gets undone, that it would just be soup inside of it, just mush. So the fact that she's relatively intact after he drops a sleeping bag, it kind of like it makes a little bit more sense if it was just like a concussive damage kind of a thing, like one hit, you're done. You know, if he'd spent the time like wailing over and over, it's like there'd be nothing but mush in that sleeping bag, you know?
No, and something about that, I can't remember the exact number because I was watching the special features on the Blu-ray, but I believe Kane Hodder said there was like 25 gallons of blood or something that was in there that they actually smashed against the tree because it was supposed to be a much bloodier kill, but it ended up weighing over 100 pounds or something like that he was bashing against the tree, which that the guy's crazy strong, and he's not a very like tall guy or by any standards, but he's a very like
stocky.
Yes, he's a very stocky man, and he portrays Jason very well.
Yeah, and I guess like the little kick that he does to the sleeping bag after he hits it down was genuine sort of like tiredness and frustration, you know.
Yeah, after you do that so many times, you're slamming 100, 125 pounds, whatever it may be, gallons of blood against a tree for however many takes. I'd probably be pissed off too, but the take that they left in the film is very good. It's not the death I chose, but it's right there. It's neck and neck with it.
Then I have to ask what death you did choose.
I ended up choosing Ben's death because I like how he comes up from behind him, grabs his head from on top of his head and below his chin, and just starts crushing his skull. Because that's not a type of head crush that you see. Normally, killers grab it from the side, hands on their temples or ears. No, he grabbed it from the top and bottom and just crushed. And if you see the special features, it just the deleted scene that the MPAA wouldn't allow. It's literally just like a tomato is being crushed or something like that. It's so gory, and I wish we could have got that in the actual film. But we a little bit.
Yeah, we deserve to see the full 4K restored version of that scene, and unfortunately, it's basically impossible. But you get to because you can imagine the level of detail in there, and it's such a brutal scene. And that's another thing. This film would probably be better regarded in that sort of Jason Goes to Hell kind of way, where maybe not a lot of people love the movie, but you can at least appreciate all of the great, cool, inventive deaths and gore and grotesque effects and all that stuff. This one would at least have that going for it if it wasn't absolutely slaughtered by the MPAA.
Yeah, because, you still, for that death scene, you still get a little bit when the camera goes down to Ben's head. You start to see kind of like blood like ooze out from like his forehead down his nose, and then it cuts away back up to Jason.
Yeah.
So, you still get a little bit, but I would have loved to see the unrated director's cut in all its flaming glory.
Yep, to quote John C. Reilly from Step Brothers, "That's not enough, Dad."
We'll probably never get it, but we can still wish.
We can dream.
Absolutely. That's all I got for that. So since we did go into a little bit of Jason's design or his character in this film and what he's wearing, how he looks, let's go into that. I'll let you lead if you'd like.
Yeah, the rotting corpse look is cool. It's unfortunate that they don't really, Part 8's problem is Part 8's problem. Part 8 doesn't really follow up on the look of this one, but from 6 to this one, it does look like he spent years in the lake, rotting away, being pecked away at by fish or this or whatever, just seeming completely waterlogged, So it's a great progression of the look. This movie does create, well, we don't got to talk about the timeline and the continuity. It's all kind of wacky anyway. We're not talking about that. Jason's design is awesome, though. The dark, rotting flesh look is just, it's very memorable, and I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got the gnarly teeth. And there was a quote from the director, John Carl Buechler, who said that he wanted to have, every time Jason had been cut or stabbed or shot, they tried to put it into this design of Jason somehow in his clothing, or like a bullet hole into like the little bit of skin or flesh that was left. And like that's awesome that a director, even if he doesn't end up getting the film that he wanted to originally direct, like in his own way, that he'd still put that much time and detail, into all of it. And it's a top tier Jason design. I mean, most people have this at the top of their list, and it's one of the most memorable that Jason appearances and looks of the franchise.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's not much more to be said for it. It is one of the iconic looks. It is one of the ones that just comes to mind when you think about it. When anyone says sort of zombie Jason, this is really the one you think of, even though there's, several films of quote unquote zombie Jason. This is the one.
Yeah, this one and Part 6 are the ones that come to mind for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't my list might be a little more controversial than yours. So do you want to get into your ranking list of the 7 films we have so far?
Yeah, so I'll go into it and I'll say, as much as there's all these things to appreciate about Part 7, it is one that the tropes are starting to wear thin at this point. The MPA butchering it didn't really do it any favors. Some of the characters, while it's fun to hate, some of the characters like Dr. Cruz, who's a slime ball, and Melissa and things like that. It is all a little bit, like it's not compared to how much energy and flair that Part 6 had. This one feels kind of bland in comparison. I'm not here to just pour haterade on the movie or anything like that. But the psychic plot, as cool as it is to see, it's kind of like, okay, we're kind of just in like comic book nonsense kind of territory. So it just, in the pantheon of all of them so far, it doesn't rate very highly for me. So I'd put Part 5 as the worst, and then it hurts a little bit, but like I'd put Part 7 as the second worst. Then Part 1 in the number 5 spot. The number 4 spot would go to Part 3. The number 3 spot would go to Part 2. Final Chapter number 4 as the second best, and Jason Lives as the best still.
Woo! Let the controversy begin. All right.
This seems like it's going to be our first big departure in opinion.
Oh, it is. This is going to be good. So in the number 7 spot, I have Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. In the number 6 spot, I have the original Friday the 13th. The number 5 spot, I have Friday the 13th Part 3. The number 4 spot, I have Friday the 13th Part 2. The number 3 spot, I have Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter. The number 2 spot, I have Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. And in number 1 spot still, I have Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives.
Oh, so I've got it as the second worst, and you've got it as the second best.
I don't know what it is about this film, but I can
understand it. It is definitely fun, and even when I break it down and say like it doesn't feel like when I'm talking about it and thinking of it, I'm like, well, it doesn't feel like it should be second to last for me. But when I'm thinking about what my opinion of the other ones are, I am kind of one of those that once these series, like I have this like allergy to when these movies, any franchise, like feels like it's just like going off the rails or getting a little too like goofy or wild. Like when the Avengers start time traveling, like that's cool, but I'm like, what are the Avengers doing time traveling, man? Like this is superhero stuff. Like get out of this time travel nonsense and do a normal movie, So it's like when Jason starts to fight a psychic, I'm like, yeah, that's neat and all, but like it's kind of weird and goofy, and it just doesn't really feel right. And we've seen a lot of these things in terms of the characters in prior movies, some of them done a little better. And then, they hacked it to pieces. That's not the fault of the movie, but it's hacked to pieces, so it doesn't have a lot of great effects. And I don't know, it's tough. It's like, well, when I really get into it, comparing it film to film to a lot of these other ones, it's hard for me to put it high. But it's better than second worst would imply.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I can like knock on it and whatnot too. Like, these are some of the most probably bland characters in the franchise. This is the one that the MPAA killed absolutely the most out of the franchise. But for some reason, I can, when I go to my movie shelf or something and I look at, all right, I want to watch a Friday the 13th movie. This is just one of the ones that I can grab, sit down, and watch. And I always am intrigued. I can sit there and watch it. I never have to sit here and pick up my phone and scroll through Facebook or whatever else I got to do. I can just sit down and watch it. I don't know what it is about it, but it's one of those films I like. It has a lot of rewatchability for me.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I mean, the section where it's sort of for me, like for me, 6, 4, 2, those are an easy top 3, and 5 is an easy bottom. The sort of part 3, part 1, part 7, they're all kind of close and together and maybe interchangeable in different ways. The 3D stuff of part 3 is really, really annoying. So there's days where I could put that under part 1. There's days where maybe part 7, at least being a Jason movie and having the Kane Hodder performance, I could maybe see things about that I like more than part 1 or 3. So 3, 1, 7 are very sort of, they're kind of in a section where they're almost interchangeable, but like part 5 I kind of definitively have as worse, and 6, 4, and 2 are definitely sort of my top 3 at this point in the series. And then 3, 1, 7 are kind of like, for all the stuff they do good, there's a lot of things that really hold them back, and so it's kind of however you are feeling on that given Sunday about which is worse. Is all of the 3D effects stupider and more annoying than the psychic plot line? Who's to say?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, there's a couple films in here that flip flop for me, but I mean, we have 5 more films, so I guess we'll see how high number 7 really stays up there, because I mean, there's people that love the next couple and there's people that hate the next couple, so I guess we'll have to see which side I teeter on there.
Yeah, that is also true. I'm also forgetting, when I say, oh, it's better than second worst, it's like, well, yeah, but if you're only talking about the first 7, of the first 7, maybe, maybe it is the second or third worst. But when we talk about the Pantheon of all 12, I don't think it will be bottom 2. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we'll see, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to it. All right, Chris, I'll give you some final thoughts on this one. I know I got it ranked as my number 2 so far, but still a couple films left to go, so we'll see what happens. But I like this film. It has a lot of rewatchability for me. I mean, it's something I can just turn my brain off, have a good time. Jason looks amazing. I like Tina as a character. Her and Nick didn't have the greatest chemistry, but I like it for what it is. All the other characters are kind of bland. They're basic. You got kind of the pothead, the stuck up bitch, the nerdy guy. You kind of got one of each little group in this, one of each character trait, and I don't know. I like it. It's easy for me to sit down and watch. So I'd recommend it to anybody who's seen most of the Friday the 13th and haven't seen this one. You might as well give it a once over. But all in all, I think it's a fun film. I have a good time with it.
Yeah, I definitely recommend watching it. I mean, the franchise as a whole, I wouldn't recommend that anyone only picks 1 or 2. I mean, if you want to skip part 5, I would say, okay, maybe you can skip part 5, but all the other ones are definitely worth watching. Yeah, I agree. I'm just kind of on the other side of the fence. The good things about it, I agree with. It's a cool Jason design. The telekinesis stuff, it is fun. Like, it's stupid, but it's fun. Like it's still entertaining. There are some movies that are kind of like overall good with a lot of bad moments that weigh them down. Some movies are kind of overall not so good, but they have a lot of kind of cool things or interesting moments that kind of bring them up. And there's still a lot to like about this, even if it's a little bit on the generic side, and if it suffered a little bit from some of the censors, and if maybe the telekinesis element of this franchise isn't so it doesn't make so much sense, but there's not a lot in this franchise that makes a lot of sense in terms of that. Once you start bringing zombie Jason in, all bets are off. But so I don't love it, but it's not terrible. It's not bad. It's just not one of my favorites.
I won't hate on you for that at all, because we were pretty good with the Godzilla franchise. We've been pretty good, pretty much in the same boat with this franchise, and with the next couple controversial films we got coming up, we'll see where we lie with those ones.
Yeah, this one's kind of, it's in those middle of the pack entries, and it's just kind of any given Sunday, whether it's kind of like the upper end of the middle of the pack or the lower end of the middle of the pack.
Absolutely. This film was followed up by Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, which was released July 28, 1989. And we'll go right into that on our next episode. So again, here for this one, thanks for joining me, Chris. I always appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. Always happy to be here.
So Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan next week. And until next time.
There's a legend round here. A killer buried, but not dead. A curse on Crystal Lake. A death curse. Jason Voorhees curse.